Maybe.
It started.
The music's not wanting to play. So, anyways, we'll just do a hard start and I'll add the music later. And the YouTube side's just going to see us suffer. All right, so three, two, one. Welcome in, everyone, to episode 152 of the Batflip podcast. My name is Damien, here with David and Matt. Today, we have our first off-season episode as the stove is starting to heat up a little bit. We've got a handful of signings to talk about, a few trades. The final managerial opening got filled. An interesting name got DF or non-tendered, and then a couple people have been posted from the NPB. But before we get into all of that, David, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Went back down to the south for Thanksgiving with my sweetheart, so that was always fun. But got to see a friend and some family, obviously, my parents, and eat some turkey, had some mac and cheese. It was all very nice. And the baseball off season starting in earnest. We got the non-tender deadline and a lot of moves, a lot of teams making those kind of interesting little roster cut type trades, and we'll get into all that in a little bit. But it's back to work today, and had a nice vacation and a good rest. So how was your Thanksgiving, Matt?
It's pretty bad actually. I've been sick for like 2 weeks, and I was real sick early last week, and I was I think I had COVID, even though I did a home test and it was negative, but I'm pretty sure I had COVID, and it knocked out my smell and taste, which is like literally the worst thing that could possibly happen for Thanksgiving. So that was
Mm.
rough, and I did make it down to the ball game on Saturday at Auburn, and it was a wild game, and it was a heartbreaker, but it was fun, and um, and I'm finally feeling a little bit better this week, and ready to talk a little baseball. I'm excited. The off season should heat up, a little bit over the next week or so. We got the winter meetings coming up, so always an interesting time here, early December in the baseball off season. So ready to get into it. How have you been, Damien?
I've been doing really well. Obviously I missed last episode at the a dog who had a really bad foot infection, but he's doing well, so I'm happy to be back there and house sat for my buddy and his watched his dog over Thanksgiving, so really just chilled and watched football for the entire week and weekend, and it was just a lot of fun. But obviously we had a some interesting stuff happen in the baseball world, which usually around Thanksgiving period usually dies down a little bit, but it was pretty active this year, which at least gave me something else to sink my teeth into. So it was overall just a lot of fun, just really chilling, hanging out. So what do you guys say we go ahead and jump right into this episode?
Let's go.
So first off, we're gonna go and talk about Aaron Nola. And he ended up re-signing with the Philadelphia Phillies on a 7-year, $172 million contract. David, I know we were talking a little bit in the chat around what of our predictions we're talking, or how our predictions kind of lined up with this. But what do you think about the deal, and kind of where you lined up on your prediction?
Yeah. So my whole thing with Aaron Nola was that he's a workhorse type of guy. And my initial prediction is, reaction was, oh man, I feel like the Phillies outbid themselves. But the first report coming out was, well, he turned down more money to stay with Philadelphia, which is, the least surprising report you're going to get. I don't know how true that is, but if there's any truth to it at all, I'm legitimately surprised. And what that's telling me is Major League Baseball teams are valuing innings pitched more than maybe the effectiveness of those innings pitched, because a couple of the other guys who signed like first here this week are innings first guys. And Aaron Nola's got that upside of being an ace, but he is crossing 30, and this is $175 million. I mean, this is really big money for a guy coming off an ERA of north of 4.25. And definitely, he's the type of guy who he's going to fluctuate season to season. I think the movement on his pitches is such that if he gets locked in, he's really going to excel, and that's where you see some of these seasons where he's gone to kind of like an ace 6 WAR type season. And some years he doesn't quite have that movement locked in, and that's what happens this season, where he kind of has to throw it down the middle and give up home runs on some of his straight pitches, because I think his curveball and his slider are two of the better breaking pitches that were available in this free agent class. Um, I think this is the right move for the Phillies. I have no qualms with the Phillies re-signing Aaron Nola. I just think that, money wise, he's getting more than like John Lester got, like more than Kevin Gosman, Robbie Ray off of Cy Young. I mean, this might be more than Blake Snell gets. It's a lot of guarantee for a guy who's had some issues keeping the ball in the ballpark. And I was in for if he was going to get a deal around that Darvish 125 130, that was where I was like, man, this will be a deal. And so I put my deal with him at 140, and Phillies are up at 175 total guaranteed money. That's a lot of money for a guy who coming off a ERA up there in the fours. So we'll see. Nola's obviously got more upside than that, but the fastball took a little bit of a step back last year. I am confident that he will continue to be a workhorse. Over the length of this deal. I don't think this will Strasburg and turn into a horrible contract, but he worries me on the efficiency of the numbers for this deal, and the duration at which the Phillies gave him that offer.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you sign a 7-year deal, you worry about, especially for a 30-year-old, you worry about the last couple of years of it. But I mean, I don't. I mean, I think Aaron Nola, with the exception of Yamamoto, I think Aaron Nola was the best pitcher on the market. His peripherals have been incredible for his entire career. Even this year, they were down, but they were still really good. A 363 xFIP was like top 10 in the National League. Um, Even though, I mean, his strikeout rate was a little down, his walk rate was a little up, but they were still elite numbers, especially the walk rate. And his home run per fly ball rate was up, which, I mean, giving up home runs in Citizens Bank Park is different from giving up home runs other places. And he's put up 33 WAR in his career, and he put up 4 WAR this year in what was a down year. So pitches a lot of innings. He's been durable, and I mean, 7 years. I think that's probably what got a couple of teams. I think the Braves were in on him and tried to give him like 6 years. I think the Cardinals maybe were the other team that I heard tried to give him 5 or 6 years. But they, and the Phillies went an extra year, and it's a similar deal to what I kind of expected him to get. I mean, like you mentioned, I mean, sometimes the stuff isn't insane, so I think that kind of limits his ceiling of how much money he's going to get, because you don't just expect him to be Garrett Cole or something. But I mean, for a high end of the rotation, maybe not a number one every year, but like a number two that has the potential to occasionally be a number one, and a guy whose stuff should continue to play pretty well, especially with his control and command, throughout the rest of his career. I mean, I think this was a very solid deal for the Phillies, and I think they did a good job locking him up.
Yeah, I think this was a great deal for the Phillies and for Aaron Nola. It's you want to keep your homegrown talent there. Nola fits exactly what they have. It gives them some stability, some innings eaters, especially with Zach Wheeler's contracts up after next year. So it gives them that guy that can be at top of that rotation if Wheeler ends up walking. It just altogether, I think it just was a match made in heaven. I never really thought that he was going to go anywhere else. It was always just going to be about using some other teams to try and get a little bit more money in my eyes. And it probably used them to get that extra year, because apparently I think they were 6 years is what the Aaron Nola's initial ask was earlier in spring training when they were talking. And then the Phillies were at 5, and I think there was about a $50 million gap is what I think I remember reading from one of the reporters there. And they were talking about like 150, and the Phillies were at like 100 million. So they ended up getting that extra year, and the Phillies went up about $70 million there. So good deal for both sides. But let's go ahead and jump over to the next one, which was It was one of the more interesting ones I think we had happen initially, and that is the Braves signing Reynaldo Lopez to a 3-year, $30 million contract. It does have a club option for 2027, but the initial plan is to use him as a starter. So, Matt, you're our resident Braves fan. Why don't you go ahead and talk about this one?
Yeah, this is very interesting. Ronaldo Lopez is a guy who, he was originally with Washington, got traded in the Adam Eaton trade with Lucas Giolito, then was there in Washington. Then he got traded with Lucas Giolito this past year to the Angels, and then he got picked up on waivers with Lucas Giolito to the Guardians at the end of the season. But this is a guy who's an absolute flamethrower out of the bullpen. For a lot of his career, he was a starter, and then he went into the bullpen a little bit 2021. And he's been in the bullpen the last 2 years. He's an absolute flamethrower. He's a guy who his since he's been in the bullpen has not had control issues until 2023, which was his control issues came up a little bit, but he did strike out a ton of guys this year. Had an elite strikeout rate. His fastball velocities average hit a career high this year at 98.4. Um, at a 3.27 ERA. I think he's a very solid reliever. Has great stuff, and I think it was a really good pickup for the Braves. And he has been a starter in his past, and a fairly okay starter. With the White Sox in 2018, 2019. At least then he ate a lot of innings. Was not a disaster. um, Peripherals weren't great as a starter, but worst case scenario, you've got a pretty good back end of the bullpen reliever, and you never know when he might be able to transition back into being a starter, and he gives you some insurance there in case you have injuries or something. But I really like the signing for the Braves. 3 years, 10 million per. Not bad for a really solid reliever who's got a 2 to 3 year track record now of being a good reliever. So I was pretty pleased with the signing, and I'm excited to see what he does in Atlanta.
My one caveat on this deal, and I think the Reynaldo Lopez deal is always going to be an intriguing one because he could be a guy that's majorly impactful in any bullpen or apparently I guess a rotation. But I wonder a little bit whether the Braves are kind of jumping the gun here with trying to insert him as a starter because his stuff ticked up once he stopped starting for the White Sox a few years ago. That's where he's getting those bigger, spin rates and stuff. He's going max effort for 1 inning, and I imagine he'll drop back a little bit when he starts starting again, and there won't be quite so much velocity, but he's got a lot of arm talent, and this deal's really cheap. I mean, 3 years, $10 million a year. That's a roster building type of move. And if it doesn't work out, he's struggles as a starter. You just put him back in the bullpen, and you've got a 10 million a year reliever. That's a fairly reasonable multi-year deal for a reliever anyway. So upside of maybe stretching him out and starting him. Downside of having a good reliever. I mean, this is a slam dunk deal, and it's another typical good Atlanta deal. I don't know if we mentioned that they re-signed Pierce Johnson, but that's another option of Atlanta's going to have a lot of high velocity in that bullpen to pair with Raisel Iglesias and a few of those other guys.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, David. I'll be surprised if he starts a game for the Braves next year. I think a lot of it's probably just they'll train him as a starter in the offseason for just for insurance in case they're not able to add another one, which I think they're for sure trying to do. Or if somebody got hurt or something, and they might need to try it. Like I think it's just kind of add versatility, and you might as well train him as a starter. So but I'll be shocked if he actually starts for Atlanta. I think he's going to definitely be in the bullpen.
It wouldn't be a bad idea just to see if you can get lightning in a bottle there or something, but most likely going to be a bullpen arm for them. So let's jump over to the National League Central, where we had the Cardinals make a flurry of moves, bringing back an old friend in Lance Lynn on a 1-year, $10 million deal with a club option, bringing in Kyle Gibson on a 1-year, $12 million deal with a $12 million club option, and then also signing Sonny Gray to a 3-year, $75 million contract with a $25 million option for 2027, so a chance to be 4 for $100 million there. So Cardinals making a flurry of moves. We knew they needed to upgrade that pitching staff, and they brought in a lot of old people, but they did bring in a lot of innings there. So David, what do you think about your NL Central rival there in the Cardinals?
Well, I think the first thing is I'm taking a picture of their rotation next year, especially with Lance Lynn in it, and I'm taking it to every hitting free agent that I'm talking to and saying, "Hey, guess what you get to play against this year?" Because Lance Lynn, man, he gave up a lot of home runs the last couple of years with the Dodgers and the White Sox. And Kyle Gibson hasn't been all that much better at limiting contact, but what both of those guys bring is health and stability, and the ability to go every 5 days and go out and pitch every 5 days without getting injured a lot, or having that same level of effectiveness. And that level of effectiveness isn't always terribly good, right? I mean, these are guys, especially in Kyle Gibson's case, that hover with an ERA, up in the high fours, low fives. They're able to go out every single day and eat innings. And I think there's something to be said for that, because I truly doubt the Cardinals had that last year, and it was a big reason as to why they were such a mess. They had no stability in that rotation. There was no leadership, and they went out and brought in 3 veterans, right? And objectively, if you separate the Sonny Gray move from the other two, I think Sonny Gray is a really good fit for the Cardinals. We talked about how much they need, help in that rotation. The Sonny Gray deal was always going to be a pretty solid deal for anyone, because I mean, he was just a finalist for the Cy Young. He's a guy who has missed bats his entire career. I doubt he'll come over to the Cardinals and struggle. He's always, he's already been in the NL Central with the Reds. He's pitched against a lot of these teams. I think that one's a slam dunk move, right? And I like Kyle Gibson as a second, deep in your rotation starting pitcher anyway. This is a guy who has a slider with a 50% whiff rate right now. Um, he's a guy I was very intrigued in as a back end guy for the Cubs, where maybe you could tweak some pitch mix and get there. But both Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn just have some big time struggles throwing their fastballs up in the zone, right? I mean, it gets just crushed. And the Cardinals are going to need those guys to take steps forward in their late 30s, which is something that doesn't usually happen, right? Lance Lynn's just not going to magically get back to the guy he used to be. And I'm certain he'll show flashes. It was exactly how he was last year. But remember, he gave up 4 home runs in an inning in the game that eliminated the Dodgers. So, I think the Lance Lynn move is funny, but it's not a move that's going to strike fear into anybody's heart, right? It's the kind of thing that the Cardinals needed. They need that stability, and those guys are going to bring that. They're going to bring that veteran leadership to the rotation. But at the end of the day, I don't know that this team is a ton better on the back end. Now, Sonny Gray helps a lot, but they started the year last year with Jordan Montgomery, and you saw where it got them. So I think this is a team floundering a little bit, trying to kind of throw 3 different darts at the wall and see what sticks. We'll see, but objectively, I like the Sonny Gray deal. I think that one's a good one. The other ones, I'm not so sure about.
So
Yeah.
the one thing, or sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was gonna say I like the way the Cardinals have approached this offseason. They knew that they needed a lot of pitchers because they really only had one guy returning from last year that you feel even like, somewhat good about. And Michaelis had a little bit of a down year, but he's the only guy you even felt like was adequate to put in your rotation. Steven Matz was going to be their number 2, I'm pretty sure, if they didn't make any moves. So they knew they needed a lot. And they knew that they're not going to be able to sign 4 different guys that have, that are the top guys in the market. So they brought in Kyle Gibson, who should work really well as a number 4, number 5. His peripherals are actually pretty good compared to his ERA has been a little high these last couple of years, but his peripherals have been good. He had a 4.13 FIP this year, 4.13 xFIP. His home run rate's really not that bad. He doesn't throw very hard. He's got to keep the ball down, but gets a lot of grounders. That should play really well with the Cardinals' infield defense. That includes Arenado, and then their new shortstop Mason Wynn is supposed to be really good defensively. Then of course you've got Goldschmidt at first, and they typically have a good second baseman, whether it's Edman or Donovan or somebody. So they should have pretty good infield defense. That should help help Kyle Gibson. Lance Lynn's a little bit more of a kind of a throw him out there as your number 5 starter for first month or 2 and see what you get. Um, he still gets swing and miss. I think that's kind of what they were looking for with him. Like, he still gets his swing and miss, but the home run ball was obviously crazy for him last year, and I definitely don't know if that's a move that's going to pay dividends, but it's definitely somebody to kind of keep an eye on to see if he can bounce back, especially being somewhere familiar again. Maybe they, find something with him. And then the Sonny Gray move, I think, is just you're getting a guy who, I don't know if he's going to pitch to a 2.79 ERA this year again, but I think you're getting a guy who's going to be pretty good. And he's fairly durable. These in 2021, 2022 didn't pitch a ton of innings, but 184 in 2023. He's always been a really solid pitcher, and that's kind of what they need is solid pitchers. So, they might even be looking at one more move. They've also got a few young guys that maybe they could try out, see if could crack the rotation. They still have Steven Matz as a number 5, maybe. But we'll see what happens. I do like how they approached this, though. Got some insurance by bringing in Kyle Gibson and Lynn, and then they were able to get one of the top guys in Sonny Gray to really anchor their rotation. I like how they approached this.
Yeah. So my thing that I like about these moves are the Cardinals as a team last year had 48 quality starts as a team. The 3 offseason moves that they've made so far, these 3 pitchers accumulated 47 quality starts themselves last year. So you're bringing in a bunch of innings eaters that are going to be able to keep you in games. And the Cardinals always have a strong defense. We know that they have the ability to put up a bunch of runs with Goldschmidt, Arenado. I mean, if they get, Wilson Contreras can still put up some runs for them too. The one thing I like about this is that they haven't made any trades yet. I mean, we were talking about this being a team that had a bunch of depth on the middle infield or a bunch of prospect depth that they can turn around and make a big deal. And even not even prospect depth. I mean, they have Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson, who are 2 major league pieces that they kind of don't have a spot for. They haven't made that move yet. You can easily make a move for one of these bigger pitchers that we're talking about on the market of a Glass now, Dylan Cease. I mean, we know they're connected to the Mariners a lot with all of their guys. And then if you're talking about like, hey, you got one of those guys, Sonny Gray, Miles Michaelis, and then like Gibson and Lynn are your 4 and 5s. They're at like $10 and $12 million, which is about market value for that level of pitcher. I mean, we saw Mike Clevenger get $12 million last year. Like Matthew Boyd got $9 million. I mean, Lance Lynn taking the shot there, getting him back into a place where he started his career. You also have to think that the home run rate probably won't stay this exact. It'll probably come down a little bit from what it was this last year, especially playing in Chicago a lot. I just think that, this team's going to be able to be solid enough on the pitching side where their defense and their offense are able to keep them in games more than what they were able to this last year. So I think all of these moves kind of make a bunch of sense, and they're not really breaking the market for it at all. So let's jump from one central division to the other central division and go to the AL Central, where the Detroit Tigers signed Kenta Maeda to a 2-year, $24 million contract. So, Matt, what do you think about this one?
I like this deal for the Tigers. I don't know what their financial situation is, so if it limits them in other ways, I don't know about it. But I think that it's a guy who's a good bounce back candidate. Coming off of Tommy John surgery this year, the stuff was kind of back from what it was before. He had he had a lot of swing and miss, over 10 strikeouts per 9, and he didn't walk a ton of guys. The velocity was back in the same realm of where it was before the injury. So he was throwing pretty good control, still getting swing and miss, and the stuff seemed to be kind of what it was. The results weren't fantastic, but they were pretty good. 104 innings. He had a 4.23 ERA, but a 4.02 FIP. I don't know if he'll be able to repeat, what he did a couple times in LA with the Dodgers, or it's definitely what he did in the shortened 2020 season when he was a legit Cy Young contender. But I think he's a really solid, like number 3, number 4, maybe number 4 starter because of the injuries. He's a little bit up there in age, but this is a guy who, he's still got the swing and miss to where you could see him having a one really good season in him where he either helps the Tigers be in the race or the Tigers could flip him at the deadline for somebody. So I do like this move. Solid pitcher. I'm very glad to see him getting a nice payday after the injury. So anytime you see a 34-year-old go through Tommy John surgery, um, you kind of worry if they're ever going to get another payday. And $24 million is nothing to scoff at. So definitely, I like this move on both ends, and we'll see if it works.
No, I love Kenta Maeda here. I think this is a a move for the Tigers to aim at competitiveness and be able to flip to getting an opportunistic sell piece if they do crumble again, right? You think a guy like Kenta Maeda who gets a lot of swing and miss in his profile, right? He's got a lot of nasty stuff. That's kind of part of the reason that he was even in this situation in the first place is his delivery is really violent. He's got a lot of arm action, and he ends up with a lot of swing and miss. That's the kind of guy who can really explode for you, especially in like a half a season's time. And then you've got 1.5 years of control, pretty cheap deal. I could very well see him being one of the premier options available at the deadline this year. Um, and if not, they can reevaluate next year as to whether you trade him in the offseason at 12 million for next year and again at the end of next offseason. So right. So you have three opportunities to kind of capitalize on this deal for what is a pretty cheap overall contract. I really like it. I like that Maeda gets to pitch in Detroit. It might suppress his ERA number a little bit, and even make him even more attractive to some of these competitive teams. So this is a good move, I think, on both ends. And Maeda gets another contract. I think he gets to be a free agent at 37. So he'll probably get another 1 or 2 year deal then as well. And I envision he'll continue to get that swing and miss here, and excel in Detroit.
Yeah, Kenta's a very, very solid pitcher. It sucks that he had started in that 2020 season. He was having a really good year and ended up blowing out his arm. And he's kind of struggled ever since he kind of got back from there. But, I think going to Detroit, he's staying in division there, but going to a more pitcher-friendly ballpark there. I think he'll be a great addition to that team, especially with the young pitchers that they have. They're trying to develop. And that keep getting injured kind of themselves. He'll be a nice guy to kind of just go in there. And I don't know how much mentoring he'll really be able to do, but just being able to watch a guy like Maeda put in the work that he does day in and day out and what he's able to do on the mound, I think it'll be great for all those young pitchers. And like you said, it's a very, very affordable salary at $12 million per year. Will be very sought after at the deadline if they look to make that kind of a move, or even next offseason, if they're kind of looking to make that move to free up some rotation space for some of their younger guys too. So very good deal for the Tigers and for Maeda, and hope he does well there. One smaller move we did have in the AL Central too was that the Chicago White Sox signed Paul DeJong to a 1-year, $1.75 million contract. Kind of just brought him in probably as a spring training type thing, see if he can battle out for that shortstop spot. We'll talk about here in a little bit with a trade they made about potential options battling there, but another smaller move that the White Sox made to bring in a shortstop there. So the last signing that we had, free agent signing at least, is that the Los Angeles Dodgers have re-signed Jason Heyward to a 1-year, $9 million deal. So he'll be back playing mostly right field against right-handers to allow Mookie to play some second base. But, he signed on a minor league deal last year, now gets a major league deal, a pay bump from what the Dodgers were paying him, but a pay decrease with what the Cubs were paying them from last year. But David, what do you think about this deal?
Yeah, no, it's official. The Jason Heyward contract in Chicago, which is the single most expensive contract the Cubs have ever handed out to a free agent, that is complete, and he played probably his best offensive season of it with the Dodgers, which that's about how it goes. This isn't surprising, right? I mean, the Dodgers used him really, really well. They have the depth to hide a bat like his, which the Cubs never really did. They also have the defensive capability of like an MVP candidate, Mookie Betts, who can kind of man that right field spot, but also shift off so that Heyward can step in there and play his still good, yet declining as he gets older. Defense. Jason Hayward's a really good guy, really good clubhouse presence. Every clubhouse he's ever been in has only raved about him. I wish nothing for the best, but the best for Jason Hayward. But it's good that he's found a home with the Dodgers and that he's having success there. It's one of those where I always kind of wish what could have been, but that hopefully his swings they leave his swing the same as it was last year and don't try to tweak anything because that's when all the problems started.
Yeah, I like Jason Hayward, of course. You know, he's been a really good player, great defensive player for a long time. He's still pretty good there. I mean, like you said, he's declining a little bit with age, but he's still solid in right field. Um, he hit well this year in playing mostly against right-handed pitching, but I don't quite expect him to hit at the same level he did this past year. I think the slugging might have been a little bit higher than he's probably going to do, but he he did. He's always gonna he's been a pretty good on base guy for a lot of his career, even in Chicago. With the exception of his last 2 years there, he was pretty good on base guy, and he's just a solid platoon guy. He got a contract that I think he probably could have gotten a little bit more money based on how he played last year, but he's a corner outfielder that's a platoon guy. So, pretty fair for him. And, I think the Dodgers are definitely happy to bring him back. I think he's definitely happy to be there because, he kind of resurrected his career a little bit there and he's fit in really well. And I'm sure that he didn't want to kind of try to hop somewhere else for a few million more dollars and ruin that. So definitely, definitely good on both sides, and I'm sure he will be pretty successful this year.
Yeah, and he gets to stay with his best friend Freddie Freeman. That's a big thing. No, I mean that's a legit thing.
Yeah.
They're like best friends. And Freddie was a big reason why Jason came here in the first place, and that was the first thing that apparently Freddie walked into Friedman's office, after in the offseason and said we need to make sure we bring Heyward back. So, they got the deal done, and he'll play mostly against righties there, but. Let's jump over to the trades that we had happen. And the big trade we had was the Arizona Diamondbacks and Seattle Mariners linking up, with the Seattle Mariners trading Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks for catcher Sebi Zavala and pitcher Carlos Vargas. So, Matt, what do you think about the Diamondbacks acquiring Eugenio Suarez?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting move. I think the Diamondbacks had a little bit of money they were willing to spend, so they took on his contract, and I mean, Eugenio Suarez is still a useful player. He's got his flaws. He strikes out an absolute ton. His slugging was way down this year, but Seattle is a tough place to hit a lot of home runs. So I think he'll probably hit a little bit better in Arizona. Still a good defender. He actually had a great season defensively this year, um, which is kind of crazy, but good player. I don't think he moves the needle a ton, but you're looking at a team that made the World Series with Emmanuel Rivera and what's left of Evan Longoria playing third base most of the year. So, he's probably an upgrade over that. And the guys they gave up for him, Carlos Vargas. I think he's a reliever. He came up and he throws really hard, but he's definitely had the command issues in the minor leagues. And he only pitched 4 innings at the big league level, so he's kind of a really solid reliever prospect. And that's definitely something that's going to help um, the Mariners, as they had they had a similar type of guy in Andres Munoz that came in and did really well there, and then Sebi Zavala is just a backup catcher, and I guess the Mariners they needed somebody behind Kyle Raleigh, so it made sense to bring him in. He's a veteran guy; he's been around a while, so he can definitely handle catching once a week or so. So definitely a good. I think it's a solid trade on both ends, and the Diamondbacks kind of got to buy a little bit of, say, hey, we've got a little bit of money to spend, so we can get a third baseman this way in a weak market, and the Mariners got, a high upside reliever, and they filled a need with a backup catcher.
I'm a little disappointed that the Diamondbacks are the ones that made this move, right? I had gone and, when we were looking through third base targets for the Cubs as alternates to Matt Chapman, Eugenio Suarez came up, and I definitely would have preferred him to Matt Chapman, especially given the cost here. I mean, I think the Diamondbacks got away with highway robbery a little bit. Eugenio Suarez is not the guy he was with the Reds a few years ago when he hit 49 home runs in the juice ball year. But what he is a fairly consistent player who is capable of playing every day, playing good to solid to good defense at third base. This year was a bit of an exception where he played great defense at third base. Um, and he hits a lot of home runs. He's going to strike out a pretty solid, sizable amount, but he's got a good plate approach. He walks a bunch to make up for it. This year, he didn't hit so many home runs, right? And the Mariners were worried about the amount of swing and miss in their lineup. Between Teoscar Hernandez and Eugenio Suarez, and even J Rod had some swing and miss issues. He was struck out like 25% of the time. They had a lot of guys who just weren't making Jared Kellenick's another one. They just had a lot of guys who weren't making contact. They're trying to get more contact oriented up there. Um, I do think that this is going to be a good move for the Diamondbacks and a move the Mariners probably won't regret, but I would think that they could have maybe gotten a little bit more for him. And Zavala's a backup catcher like Matt said, and Vargas is kind of a reliever at best. I think Eugenio Suarez had a little more in the tank. I think he could have gotten back to maybe a 30 home run type of season, and the Diamondbacks are going to benefit from this, right? I mean, that's a team that just went to the World Series that definitely gets better here. They get a more reliable face at third base, and we'll see if he can get back to that power that he showed off the first year in Seattle, and the last couple of years in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is kind of exactly what Arizona really needed from this third base spot. I mean, we heard that they were going to be, interested in Matt Chapman. And like David said, they got basically the Matt Chapman type kind of production for a backup catcher and a bullpen arm that, might not make it here. And for all accounts too, Eugenio Suarez is a good leader. That Seattle clubhouse really loved him. So bringing even more of strong leadership to an Arizona team, they have a bunch of younger guys there: Corbin Carroll, Alec Thomas, Geraldo Perdomo, Dominic Fletcher. I mean, all the outfielders that they're going to have there gives them some stability at third base here and just gives them another power bat, which is one thing they were kind of lacking. I mean, they had, you had Christian Walker and you had Ketel Marte, but outside of that, they really didn't have much power in that lineup. I mean, Corbin Carroll hit 20 homers, I think, as well. But Eugenio Suarez is a guy who can give you 30 plus there. So yeah, I think it's a really good fit for the Diamondbacks. It's really cheap for them. And then on the Mariners side, I don't know what they're doing here. Like, I don't know if this is just the pure salary dump and they're going to try and reinvest that somewhere, or if they're really hurting that much financially right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but Jerry Dipoto also works in weird ways. So we'll just have to see what happens in the long haul there. But overall, it's just a very good trade for the Diamondbacks, very weird trade for the Mariners, and we can only see what happens from here. But another trade that we had happen, which was kind of more of the kind of shocking trade. It was right around the non-tender deadline, but that was the White Sox and Braves lining up on a trade to see Aaron Bummer go from Chicago to Atlanta for 5 players: Mike Soroka, Jared Schuster, Braden Shoemake, Nicky Lopez, and Riley Goins. So Matt, you can probably tell us, about some of these players that the Braves gave up there and why it makes sense to get Aaron Bummer.
Yeah, well, first off, Aaron Bummer, being the key piece of the trade, he's a really good reliever. I think he had a really high ERA this year, but it was way higher than all his peripherals. And for his career, he's been really solid. A 2.36 ERA in 2022. He had an 0.96 ERA, but it was just in like 10 innings in 2020. But he's been a really solid reliever, a lefty. The Braves have AJ Minter as a lefty, but behind him you don't really have a ton because you don't know what you're going to get from Tyler Matzik coming off of Tommy John surgery. Dylan Lee dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Those were kind of your 2 primary lefties behind Minter. So now you went out and got Aaron Bummer, who is probably better than he's not better than Matzik at his best, but he's at least a more stable option than either one of those guys at this point. To be kind of your second lefty in the bullpen, and he's also got a lot of control left. He's got a few years, and I do think Minter's a free agent after next year, so definitely a guy to kind of look out for here is Aaron Bummer. But the guys the Braves gave up for him, I think got a lot more. I think there was some shock value to this trade because of the names. Mike Soroka being the main one, and he's dealt with so many injuries. He had the double Achilles tear where he tore his Achilles, was coming back and just walking into the clubhouse, tore it again, which was crazy, and a freak injury. He's dealt with shoulder injuries a couple times. This past year, he was shut down at the end of the season with I don't remember if it was, I think it was a forearm strain, but it didn't involve his UCL. So he didn't need Tommy John surgery or anything, but they had to shut him down anyways. And he really struggled coming back this year. He pitched 87 innings at AAA and was fine there. He had a 4.42 xFIP, which was pretty rough. His other peripherals were fine, 3.41 ERA. He was really not good at all at the big league level though, and he was definitely going to be non-tendered because he doesn't have any options, and the Braves can't afford to have him work it out at the major league level on the roster that's trying to compete for the World Series. So he wasn't going to be back with the Braves. So they went ahead and shipped him off. Jared Schuster's a former first round pick who just his stuff's just not very good at all at this point. Um, he and his control just completely went away last year. Both at AAA and in the big league level, he was just really, really rough. Um, so he is a former first rounder. He had a great changeup, which is kind of a feel pitch. So, but I think he's going to be like AAA depth. Nicky Lopez is interesting. He's a guy that he's an excellent defensive player, and I think the Braves do like him, but because of his 6 WAR season in 2021, his arbitration value is going to be a little bit inflated for a guy who is really just a utility bench player that can play defense if you get in trouble. So he he's a guy that I think that the Braves didn't want to spend. The Braves felt like they didn't have to spend $4 million on a guy like Nicky Lopez because that's what his our potential was. So that they could probably get a guy similar to him for you know the major league minimum or a minor league deal or something. So that's why they included him. Braden Shoemake's another former first rounder who just has not hit anywhere he's been. And Riley Goins is just a low minors reliever, really a non prospect. You never know with a guy that's in A ball, but he hadn't really done too much. He was a recent draftee, so definitely a wild trade. So many names got moved in this one, but I really do like this from both ends. I mean, the White Sox get a couple of guys that you could maybe see figuring it out if they get some real big league playing time, and then the Braves get a lefty reliever that they need, and one that could be really really good if he's if he's able to if his peripherals are lined up more with his actual what he's going to do, and kind of getting away from the White Sox probably helps with that too. But definitely an interesting trade here.
Yeah, I like Aaron Bummer as a trade target. This trade felt like very much like it was kind of a Aaron Bummer for Braden Shoemake as a post hype prospect with, hey, we want to take on the guys you're definitely going to non-tender and see if we can't sign them to a 1-year deal and agree to tender those contracts type of deal, because the White Sox didn't want to go all the way to free agency with some of these guys, and it seems like a wise little move for the White Sox. They pick up a lot of bodies, and when you're a team that's definitely in the middle of a rebuild, you need a lot of bodies. Um, I think Nicky Lopez and Paul DeJong can kind of fight it out for that shortstop spot, kind of officially move on from Tim Anderson, and um, I think the Mike Soroka deal is certainly an interesting one. The White Sox have shown to be able to reclaim some starting pitchers and get the most out of some of guys in that role. So hopefully Soroka can kind of get going there. And I think Aaron Bummer as kind of the 7th-inning lefty for this Braves bullpen is going to be really nasty. He'll have an actual good defense behind him this year, so I think he'll that ERA might match his FIP. His left on base percentage won't be in the 50%, right? Like it just seemed like Aaron Bummer got really, really unlucky last year, and For a guy who throws a power sinker and has a really, really nasty off speed pitch, you would have thought, I think it's a sweeper. You would have thought this is a guy who would have gotten better results, and he just wasn't able to do it in front of the White Sox defense. So, with the Braves, he makes the third Braves bullpen addition this offseason. The Braves have very clearly made a plus Reynaldo Lopez, so really four. The Braves have made a very clear, concerted effort to improve their bullpen, which was maybe their one weak spot before last year. So I think we'll see the Braves maybe make another addition in the starting rotation. But yeah, that's a team that's very focused on, uh, you know, going from being the best team in baseball all season, but losing in the playoffs, to being the best team in baseball and winning in the playoffs next year. I think that's a very clear goal for the Braves.
Yeah, it's wild that all the Braves have to do is just look at starting pitching upgrades because their lineup is set for like 37 years. That kind of helps. But
Yep.
The Braves did have another trade that we needed to kind of hit on here a little bit, and that's the Kyle Wright to the Royals for Jackson Kowar. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and explain that one a little bit more too?
Yeah, so Kyle Wright had a shoulder injury this past year that kept him out most of the year, and then at the end of the season they had to do like an exploratory surgery, and they found some, like, I think it was like capsule repair they had to do or something. So he's going to miss all of next year. And I think the Braves wanted to go ahead and just move him because he is owed real money, after his 2022 season. And he's in ARB now, and he's 27. He will not pitch this year because of the injury, so he won't be pitching again until he's 29. Has a one good big league season, but other than that, a pretty shaky track record, and he's coming off of a shoulder injury, which in a lot of ways is worse than coming off an elbow injury. I mean, it's just really, shoulders can be tricky, and you never know how the shoulder injuries are going to turn out. And he was really rough in his 31 innings this year too. So it sucks to see him get traded. He's, former first round pick, top 5 pick, who 2022, it looked like he was finally figuring it out. And then he just, had all the injury issues this year, and you just don't know what you're going to get from him. So the Braves went ahead and moved him, and got Jackson Kowar for him, who is a kind of one of those post-hype prospect type guys. He still does get a lot of swing and miss, but the walks have been a problem for him. Throws hard, so he's kind of a flyer. Maybe you can put him in AAA for the beginning of the season. He could figure out he can figure out his pitch mix a little bit. Maybe find something. You can end up with a reliever that a hard throwing reliever. And from the Royals' perspective, I mean, Kyle Wright's a great ad for them. They really need arms, and Kyle Wright's a guy that if he can recover fully from his injury, come back in 2025, you're not going to be competitive this year. You get him in 2025, and you could. There's a world where Kyle Wright comes back and he's healthy and he repeats his 2022 season when he won 21 games, had a 3.19 ERA and 180 innings. So um, there's a world where Kyle Wright is a great pickup for the Royals. I just think that the Braves didn't. They need help this year, and the uncertainty on that injury and everything made him want to move him. So definitely an interesting deal, and I really like this one for both sides.
Yeah. So we had another trade happen right around the non-tender deadline as well. It was kind of a smaller deal, but it was a reliever for reliever with the Padres and Guardians lining up on a deal that sees Aniel De Los Santos go to the Padres and Scott Barlow go to the Guardians. So, David, what do you think about this deal?
Yeah. I mean, the Guardians are an interesting team here this offseason because they can either potentially jump onto that sellers market and maybe trade Shane Bieber and start kind of focusing on the future a little bit and trying to develop some of their younger guys, or especially with a new manager coming, or they can kind of go for it a little bit and going for Scott Barlow. There's definitely an upside play here where Barlow kind of stunk when he got over to San Diego last year. He was maybe a hot commodity right around the time he went, got the trade deadline hit last year. A lot of people were talking about him going to the Rangers in that Aroldis Chapman trade, and it never materialized, right? But the thing about Scott Barlow is he's got some upside. He's got a bit of a track record of being a pretty successful pitcher, and the Guardians can definitely potentially flip him back at the deadline once again. They've shown that they're willing to make flips like that, especially like they did with Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez at the deadline this year. So this is a a creative team making a creative move. And De Los Santos is a guy who's got underperformed a little bit, but has a good fastball. He's the type of pitcher that you think maybe one small tweak to his pitch arsenal, pitch mix, shapes, something would unlock another level for him. I don't know if the Padres are the team that is going to be able to do that. That's a team that's kind of failed in terms of bullpen execution over the last couple of years. Especially last year with their record in extra innings games being so bad. But Enyel De Los Santos is a guy who definitely has some upside and has a couple of years of control left still on them. So the Padres can figure him out. He throws 95, 96, and I don't think the numbers really matter here. If he goes to San Diego and has success, then it's going to be a really good move for him. But Barlow is a little more of a sure thing and has a more track record. But I think De Los Santos might be the better pitcher in the long run, and it's just going to be whether San Diego can make those adjustments. This could be a complete non-factor type of deal, but it could also be something we're revisiting if either of these teams decides to sell next deadline, because these two might be two of the better pieces that they have in their bullpen to sell off. So there you go.
Yeah, and it cleared some salary off those San Diego books too.
I think that's
As
fair.
Barlow's a free agent next year. De Los Santos is pretty cheap. So,
right.
So that is all with the transactions of signings and trades. So let's jump over to the miscellaneous part. And it's kind of a good segue. We're talking about the Padres already. So it'd be a good time to mention that they did officially hire their new manager in hiring Mike Schilt. I believe he was bench coach for them last year, or he was on the staff in some sort in uniform for the Padres there. But, the former Cardinals manager, who I think we all said when it happened, when he got fired, that we didn't really get it. He's now got another opportunity here in San Diego to be their manager. So Matt, what do you think about this one?
I mean, I think Mike Schilt did a fine job when he was a manager for the Cardinals. He was they went on a huge run, made the playoffs. He got fired and won National League Manager of the Year in the same season, which is kind of crazy. But I definitely think that was a mistake by the Cardinals, because even if you don't love Mike Schilt, the replacement for him has not worked at all. So, I think that this was a good, and I think it's a good move for the Padres. I mean, they obviously like him. It's hard to say what the Padres are gonna. It's hard to say how successful they're going to be, and if things get pinned on him, because their team's probably not going to be as talented this year as it was last year. And I mean, if Bob Melvin can't figure it out there, I don't know how he's that much better than Bob Melvin. But I think Mike Schilt's a fine hire. He's done a good job before. He's got experience as a manager, and we'll see if he's able to figure it out with the Padres.
What tells me that the Mike Schilt hire is a good move is the Cardinals' kind of imminent collapse as soon as he left, right? I mean, they made the playoffs that year that he managed, but after that, they have not been nearly the same squad. And you look at the kind of disaster it's been this year under Ollie Marmol. I mean, I do wonder whether Schilt sticking around would have been the right move for them. And this is a very reasonable deal for the Padres, who they lose Bob Melvin. Bob Melvin was supposed to be kind of the guy who catalyzed that ascent to the top, and with the change in ownership now and all the fluctuation of the Bally Sports and the TV rights deal and stuff, cutting off the money flow a little bit from the Padres. This Mike Schultz a really solid candidate. We saw them get bandied around with a few more wild candidates, but this is a really safe one. I don't know that he moves the needle a lot for this Padres team, right? There's still a lot of holes on this team, and if they're going to get through this offseason without trading Juan Soto, they have a lot of needs to plug with probably a limited budget. So, we'll see whether Mike Schilt can kind of steer them the right direction here, and he's going to have to manage a lot of superstars and a lot of egos, but it seemed like he was pretty good at that as the Cardinals manager. So, I kind of think that he'll be all right for this job, and that this is a good manager hire.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fine. It depending on what their roster looks like, given what they're gonna have to do, financially wise. Are they going to have Soto? Are they not going to have Soto? I mean, what moves do they have to make? How bad are their books really? Or what do they have to actually get to? That's going to depend on a lot of it, but I think Mike Schilt will be a fine manager for him, and we'll see how it works out. So a couple little miscellaneous notes just to hit on real quick. We've talked about Yoshinobu Yamamoto before. He was officially posted, and his 45-day negotiating window ends January 4th, so he has to sign by that day or at the end of that day. And all accounts are that he'll sign probably after the winter meetings next week. He's going to take final visits with teams after that point. So we got that. And then Shota I always mess this up. Imanaga. There we go.
Yep.
He was also posted. I believe today was his first official day being posted. So his date is January 12th that he has to sign by. So both those pitchers are out there. And then we know the Jung Ho Lee, he'll be posted in early December, but we'll get to that one here in a little bit. But Yamamoto and Imanaga is posted. So we officially know their dates and when they have to sign by. So at least we know some guaranteed action by those days. And then looking at the non-tender list, really one interesting name that we kind of wanted to hit it on here is that the Milwaukee Brewers non-tendered Brandon Woodruff. It was right before the playoffs. Rosters were set. It came out that Woodruff had a shoulder injury that was going to require surgery. He was going to miss all of the 2024 season. I believe his number was going to be 15 million or 18 million in arbitration, something around there. And that basically the Brewers would, Brewers as a team that don't really spend big money anyways, weren't going to be able to pay that for a guy who wasn't going to pitch for them. So he got non-tendered there, and all indications are he'll sign a 2 to 3 year deal on the market. But were you guys shocked to see that Brandon Woodruff got non-tendered?
I wasn't shocked after I saw it because I didn't really think of it. Just at the non-tender deadline, it wasn't something that was like on the top of my mind. But it doesn't really surprise me. I mean, Milwaukee's a team that's strapped for money every year, and they said, why are we going to pay him if he's just going to walk in free agency when he's not going to pitch for us this year? And I do think there's actually a remote chance he comes back at the end of the season. But I think the big thing for me with Woodruff is it's going to be interesting. Is he going to sign a 2-year deal or something that guarantees him a little bit of money this year, and then next year he can kind of come back and prove it on a 1-year deal? Or is he going to just wait and take the full season off and come back next year and sign in the off season, after doing like a showcase or something to show that he's healthy? I think that's going to be the interesting thing here. But I definitely really like, I like Brandon Woodruff. I think he's a really good pitcher, and it would be interesting to see if a team takes a flyer on a 2-year deal or a short deal with him, to see if maybe he can come back this year late in the season and help out maybe a playoff contender. And if not, you got 2025. He could come back then and help a team. So definitely hated to see that. And then there's several other non-tenders that I'm sure will be interesting when they sign. I think off the top of my head, maybe Austin Meadows was kind of an interesting one that, kind of when he was with the Rays, he was really good type thing. There's been a few others as well in that same vein, but definitely the big name was Brandon Woodruff because he's a true all-star caliber pitcher that, that is now on the free market.
I think I'm guessing a team is definitely going to sign Brandon Woodruff to a 2-year deal. It's very logical, makes a lot of sense for Woodruff to find some place he's comfortable with rehabbing and potentially rebuilding his value over the next 2 years. I almost think it's a lock where he'll take kind of a pillow contract that reduces the total cost for this first season to 3-5 million, something like that, very very minimal, and then the next year is going to be up more like 18 to 20, to kind of reduce the overall cost of that contract, to keep that AAV down a little bit, but and the payroll down in the first year, and then kind of more gear him up to be able to take on that second year. Whether Brandon Woodruff will be able to overcome a shoulder injury, that's what's to be seen, right? I mean, Matt mentioned it earlier. you'd feel confident about elbows that the pitcher can get back to how they were, but shoulder injuries are just a little bit scarier. And I know that Woodruff has that shoulder injury. So is it thoracic outlet syndrome or is it's a different one, isn't it?
I think it's capsule. I
Yeah,
want to
I
say.
think it's
It's
similar to Kyle
capsule.
Wright's.
So, yeah, and I think Kyle Hendricks just came back from this last year, and he pitched well last year. Compared, he was kind of back to his old self. So, hopefully there's some kind of confidence growing with this capsule surgery, and hopefully these guys can get back to it. But I imagine that Woodruff will be a premium target here for these free agents, this free agent period, and a lot of playoff style teams will be hunting for him. But especially the teams that are good at rehabbing pitchers, and that's where I don't know who that is. I don't think any of us do, but I'm sure there's kind of a some ideas in the industry of who those are, and that's where we'll see kind of the rumors for Woodruff pop up is the teams that are the best at the rehab side of things, and the team that can get the most creative with this deal, right, to kind of make sure that he gets compensated right in the midst of arbitration, but also sets him up for a big year to come back and then prove that he's healthy to make a run at free agency. So I like Brandon Woodruff. I think this will be a good deal. And then my one non-tender to mention was Nick Senzel, got non-tendered by the Reds. I think that one will be kind of interesting. He's never been able to stay healthy, but when he is healthy, he's usually pretty good, and he can play center field. So he can kind of be maybe an interesting little player to go to one of these teams and try to stay healthy for a full season finally. But yeah, I mean, overall, pretty low end arbitrate or a non-tender period deadline where only one real star was kind of non-tendered, and for a very specific reason, being that shoulder injury.
Yeah, it's not like with some of the other years where we've seen, like a Kyle Schwarber or Cody Bellinger, somebody that's going to go in and be able to have an immediate impact kind of right away. So, but that kind of wraps up everything we have on the docket for the show. Next week is winter meetings, so we'll see a ton of action. It already seems like it's going to start heating up. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another signing or two before the winter meetings, and then obviously usually get a good bit of action there. And all signs point to the market kind of waiting on the starting pitching. So if we get a few of those deals, then maybe we'll see the trade market and a couple other things kind of start heating up there. But be on the lookout. We'll probably be able to do some emergency episodes if we get some of the big signings like a Yamamoto or an Ohtani. We'll make sure to get back here. But one other thing too, it's not really podcast related, but I've been meaning to do it for a while. If you guys are into baseball cards at all, anyone listening to this, Batflip podcast has partnered with somebody to start Batflip Breaks. It's a baseball card place. You can go look up. All their social medias are just Batflip Breaks. Same logo, just green. They have a district where they do cheap, affordable breaks if you're into kind of baseball cards type stuff. So go check them out. And if you have your first purchase, it's on district, you get $5 off. So it's pretty much a free team for what he does. So go check out Hank and the Batflip Breaks page and help them kind of get started over there. So anyways, as of right now, our next episode would be, what are we looking at? The 12th?
2 weeks.
Is that kind of 2 weeks?
I'll
Yeah, 2 weeks from today.
I was gonna say I won't be surprised if we're back next week because with the winter meetings going on, there's been a lot of rumors that Ohtani could sign before the winter meetings. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's a possibility. And then I'll be shocked if we don't have multiple big names go, whether it's trades or signings at the winter meetings. Of course, it might be Wednesday at the winter meetings, but there's a pretty good chance we have an episode before then.
Yeah, I would say right now it's scheduled for the 12th, but be on the lookout because I'm sure we'll have some emergency pods that will be going over some of the big news. That's not really words, but some big news and moves that have happened. So anyways, anything else you guys want to wrap up on real quick?
I think That's pretty
Nope.
much it for
Nope.
me.
Nope. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this episode of the Batflip podcast, and we'll see you back here potentially next week.